Hello, my name is Parker.
And my name is Ned.
And this is the Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 17. We are recording June 16th. Happy Father's Day, Ned.
Happy Father's Day, Parker. Did you have a good Father's Day? Were you feted by your offspring?
I feel like we have reached the appropriate level of progressivity in the universe. I was gifted a wide variety of cooking implements with which to make me happier when I cook meals for my family. So I have been complaining about the state of some of our frying pans, and I got new frying pans and new spatulas. So the kind of thing that would have made, I think, some spouses, female spouses, angry in the 50s, 60s, not being appreciated. We have reached a point now where I am elated by getting these things. So we are probably 10 years out from me feeling, not me, but future male generations feeling, future male members of our society feeling resented, and why didn't I get something romantic? But we're close, right? We're getting close to that level of parity. So I was delighted. It was a wonderful gift.
That's awesome.
Good. How about yourself, Ned? Anything? Any fun anecdotes?
I got a card. We went for the
was it rare?
Bike ride.
Legendary?
What? No, it was not.
It rare?
Well, I would say it was
legendary?
legendary. I think that there is only one copy of this card in existence because it was made by hand by my child, which is adorable. And then we went out for a bike ride Sunday Parkway. So I went for a lovely Mexican dinner. Got some seafood enchiladas.
I didn't realize Chipotle did seafood, but
yes, that. I would have been fine with Chipotle, but they bumped it up a notch. There was an executive decision was made not to just get the old $7
Taco Bell seafood.
burrito.
I did not know they did seafood at Taco Bell, so that is sketch. Ned, tell me about the match we just played.
We played Vader Green against Palp Double Green. I copied card for card a list that won a local. It was in the hot decks list on Swoop. Sorry. It won Premier Lugar 2605-2023 Showdown CL by KIKEDB on hot decks under SwooDB. So
since this is our last episode, Ned, recording under Spark of Rebellion. By the time we will record one more episode under Spark of Rebellion, but this is the last episode we will release under Spark of Rebellion. And so kind of as a callback to that, more on that, dear listener, as a callback to that, I played Vader Green because that is the first deck I played with real cards at my first pre-release. I was able to open, it's the only time you get to play Vader or Luke in Limited. I took advantage of it, played Vader Green, so I wanted to call back to that. That went poorly for me.
It did not go well. Yeah,
I did not. Back-to-back defeats, crushing defeats.
Yeah, I can't say that I felt under a huge amount of pressure in any of the games. I mean,
I had a terrible mulligan into a bad hand. Game 1, so I can kind of blame it on that, but game 2, I mean, it's just a bad matchup. Game 2, I drew exactly what I wanted every single time, and I died.
Yeah, and I even made a horrible misplay where I failed to read the text on command because I don't normally play double green. But command is that famous, the famous nerf, that command is kind of weak because they added that non-unique clause. It originally did not have it. And it was the modal choice, I believe, per Tyler. It was the modal choice that everybody chose. So they, pretty late in Spark Rebellion dev cycle, added the non-unique clause, which arguably makes command a rough scene. It does
to the bane of Hera players everywhere.
It makes it remarkably less good, which is unfortunate. I mean, I don't know. I, for one, will be glad when I don't have to, when the 7-resource turn comes around and we're playing 2 green Villainy decks, just watch Vader slam into each other over and over.
Vader into Vader into Vader. Yeah, that was a lot of slap fighting.
It was a lot of slap fighting for control. And, what else are you going to do, right? You can't... You play the card because it's good, and the card specifically lends itself into a play pattern where you throw it down, you attack their best unit, and then you hope that you spin into something that keeps you from being slapped back in return.
Yeah, cell block guard, and it'll still be there, Ned. It's not going anywhere, but we have that wager that Maul might take a dent out of that. Which brings us to our next segment, dear listeners, SORder in the Court.
I didn't bring my powdered wig.
Wrong court, Ned. This is America, GD.
Okay.
That pun, SORder, looks better spelled out than it does sound. But, dear listener, I think it's fair to say the Force Unlimited traditionally hews a little away from the conventional topic du jour in Star Wars Unlimited. We don't do preview discussion. We tend to talk about weird esoteric things. There are exceptions. Again, tonight's episode is the last one we're going to air before the end of Spark of Rebellion, and I thought, Ned and I thought it would be fun to do a slight review of Spark of Rebellion, but rather than acknowledge that we were ever wrong in any way, rather than go through all of the decks or all of the cards, I may have alluded to once or twice that I used to be an attorney. So Ned and I are going to argue because banal, pedantic, esoteric arguments are not only something lawyers love, but Ned's not a lawyer, but we still love doing that as well.
Absolutely.
The more pedantic and banal, the better. So we're just going to pick a couple topics that we think have two sides.
Yeah.
We're going to take a side. And then we're going to talk about it, and we're going to argue with each other, even if, and this is important, dear listener, Ned and I are in actual agreement. We believe that we have a commitment to zealous defense of our point of view. Mm-hmm. So, topic number one.
All
Ned,
right.
I'll let you pick this. Pick whether you want to be for or against. But the claim before the court, before Force Unlimited Court, is Boba decks warp the meta.
I will pick the against side of this.
All right. I'm going to then I'll take 4. So
you're the affirmative. All right.
Yes. So I believe I am claiming that Boba decks warp the meta. And
so we're speaking here specifically about Boba, the leader, the Villainy yellow leader.
Yes. Boba decks specifically as the Villainy leader. Boba, the unit,
is very good.
Arguably pretty pushed.
Yeah.
But Boba, the leader. And
yes.
Boba, the leader, at this point we now have 2 sets worth of leader previews. Mm-hmm. And 1. I mean, Boba leader's the most pushed stat-wise. I don't know if that's because they thought Boba is cool, because the devs have an unhealthy fixation on Villainy yellow. I've heard this has been a problem in the past with other games that have colors and Villainy in Star Wars. I can't ascribe to why. Maybe they underestimated how good the ability was. Mm-hmm. But the Boba leader is handily the best leader with the stats. He has Mando stats for 5, whereas every other Mando gets Mando stats of 4, 7 for 6. Problem 1, his ability is good. In yellow has a smorgasbord of 1 and 2 cost cards to take advantage.
Yes.
So he has just an amazing flip turn, right? Mm-hmm. He flips on resource 5. You've got the 5 resources. He flips. He can probably, generate another 2 resources. 7 resources on resource 5 is huge.
It's a lot. If you can use all of them, that is,
And don't Ned. I know you were never an attorney, but never concede my points, man. That's
okay. All right.
If you concede my points,
I'm an academic.
The jury
I believe in being fair. I believe in being fair. All right.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you have Boba Yellow,
mm-hmm.
who is tempo bordering on aggro, right? That you can run under some competitive aggro decks, but you also have Boba Green, who dominates the mid-range and gives the kind of lower band of control decks, the soft control decks a hard run for their money is obscene. And last, my 3 points. Overstated. Covers too fast a spread. It is fast for tempo. It is fast for mid-range.
Yep.
And 3 is that there are a couple leaders who have that kind of one turn that you have to plan around, right?
Yes.
In most control decks, Iden, Blue Vader, where you're worried about Super Laser Blast, you have to plan around Super Laser Blast, which costs 8.
Yeah.
You have Palp, which I just suffered at the hands of, which he flips on 8, right? Like you have to plan around losing 1 of your units for the rest of the game at 8. Yeah. Boba's flip turn is at 5. It is turn that turn, especially in Green Boba with ramp, like you have to be prepared for a dominating turn. An aggro deck can run under Palp. An aggro deck can run under Iden, Blue Vader. Like you can avoid the Super Laser Blast. Even a very aggressive like Sabine Yellow deck is going to get to Resource 5, especially against ramp. So you have to plan around that turn, that awful turn in every single game. And so those are my kind of the 3 arguments in favor. Like, I'm not saying it's brokenly good. There's compelling arguments to be made to run other decks, but Boba definitely like defines the meta for Spark of Rebellion.
So I am going to take the against. So I'm going to start off by putting out my case. So my case is mostly an empirical case. The reason why it's mostly an empirical case is that early on in SOR, we saw Boba decks extremely dominant. If you'll remember that episode that we did where I ran the simulations for tournament results, we were seeing about like a 60% effective win rate for Boba Green, it was Boba Green against the field, right? And since then, Boba has not maintained that level of control. I'm not saying it's a bad deck. It's still a very, very good deck. But if you look at results that are coming in nowadays, if you look at like the garbage rollers, tier lists, you see a lot of Boba, but you also see other things, right? So if we're talking about like warping the meta, every strong deck requires that you plan around it, right? Like I hear your arguments for the 8 turns, like your Iden, your Vader, your Palp, control turns that are coming in on 8 where you're trying to run underneath them. But if you're a mid-range player, you have to have a plan around that. You need to understand that because frequently you're not going to be able to close the game out by turn 8. It is hard. As an aggro player, you can close the game out by turn 8 if you're doing well, which is meaningful. But I think that to the extent that you are requiring a plan against Boba, you also require a plan, I would say, against Sabine. And the Sabine plan, like, it is less of a turn defined, right? Like Boba, specifically, you need to have that plan for the 5 resource turn. And that 5 resource turn may come on your 5 resource turn, it may come on your 4 resource turn, but you need to have a plan for that. For Sabine, there's not like that same key turn that you're focusing in on, so it's less like a shiny object, but you need to have a plan to survive like turn 2 and turn 3 and not let them get like heavy on the board. Because if they're heavy on the board and you're not in a position to like overwhelming barrage and clear it off or some other multi-target removal, not that anybody runs bombing run, but in the event that like bombing run became part of the meta, some other multi-target removal.
D-House runs bombing run. Objection.
Okay. So. Okay, noted.
Brown Batman runs bombing runs. But yeah, continue.
So granted it is a strong deck, but you're not seeing the meta results that suggest that it is a dominant deck. It is a deck that has a key turn, and that key turn does come early, but there are other decks that have earlier turns that you need to be planning around, and those decks are certainly not considered to be meta warping. They are just like, there are aggro decks. A healthy format will have aggro decks. You need to be able to survive dealing with aggro decks, so make sure that you have a plan for that. And I don't think that Boba is necessarily so out of band for those. The final point that I will make is that it is and can be very, very fast, but in general, I would rather, for the health of an early game, have an aggro or tempo-oriented mid-range leader be the boogeyman than to have an aggro be the boogeyman. Because, again, this is me, just sort of observationally, I don't mind losing to aggro. I don't mind losing to control. But for a lot of players, it is more frustrating to lose to aggro, like a hyper aggro list, because you feel like you have not gotten a game in. The game has barely even gotten started and you've already lost. And then control, there are numerous documented player frustrations around control. Losing a control because you have to play in a very different way. You have to have your mind oriented in a different way to play against control. For newer players or players who are not trying to play aggressively competitively, you want to, if you are a game designer, until your game is established, it is really important to try and make sure that people get very positive experiences, because you don't have a big backlog of goodwill to line back on if your meta is bad. And so making sure that mid-range decks are good, and yeah, okay, Boba might be a little bit overpushed stat-wise. We can make arguments that it is a strong deck, but meta-warping, I don't see that it is more meta-warping than other comparably powered decks. So yeah, that's kind of my counter-argument.
Okay. Dear listener, we're going to have to let you be judge. Yes. Respond in the comments. We don't normally call for that, but it's the only way we can ask for that.
Get in the comments.
Get in the comments. Are Boba decks, do they warp the meta? Next claim before the court. Green has too big of a color pie slice. I will take the against.
Thank you, Parker. I will always
defend green. I will always defend green until the meta is stale and boring.
So, Parker, you played Vader green as part of a nostalgia. This is the deck that I went into with. This is the deck I want to exit with. When I started playing, when I was first looking at SWU, when I was first getting excited about SWU, I was very excited about Palpatine. I was very excited about just Villainy green seemed interesting to me, but the more and more cards that I saw in green, the less I liked it, because I felt that I like playing things that are more scrappy crappy, either in the aggro sense or in the control sense. I'm not a big fan of the dominant strategy. I want to be one step removed. And part of
Objection, Your Honor. Ned's personal deck preferences aren't relevant. This is about the color green and the objective abstract.
Withdrawn. So I played double green Palp specifically because it is a double green deck that is basically only playing double green for command, and command is just there to act as a crummier version of resupply and super laser tech, right? We saw in the
game, you just needed a third ramp.
I just needed more ramp, right? So I'm playing a double green deck. I'm not getting elements from other colors to try and supplement this. And again, this is small sample size. I'm not, but I did not feel hard done by in terms of my access to useful tools. To kind of go into a more theoretical level rather than just talking specifically about the deck that I just played against another deck, green, the kind of core idea that they talk about, that Xander and folks talk about, is that green's ID is kind of oriented around units. But the problem is that units are the primary pieces of the game, right? Attachments go on units. Events generally exist to affect units. There are not decks that exist in the game right now that can win unitless, right? I can imagine in some distant future where you're able to run 20 identical copies of Fachibi or something like that you can have a primarily event-driven deck. But for now, everybody has to play with units, and if your core ID is you are good at units, then that means your core ID is you are good at the game. So historically, as a piece of historical evidence, green in Magic for a long time had creatures as its big identity, and so it had both go wide and big boys as part of the
so
color
go
pie.
wide meaning lots of small units.
Lots of little stuff, right? So you had some decks that were lots of little stuff, and some decks and also like the big green monsters that you get to attack with. And eventually, this had to be split out because it was cannibalizing too much of the color pie from other colors. And I'm seeing this same feeling, again, we're one set in, there's a lot of ground to cover. I could absolutely be wrong, but I'm seeing the same kind of a feeling where you get both the big boys, you get like 97th Legion, you get Devastator, the big green starships are a thing. You don't see like big starships in other colors at about the same rate. And then you also see things that play well with lots of little boys. So you've got, or lots of little units. You've got like General Krell. You've got U-Wing reinforcements that digs through your deck and brings out a bunch of units. You've got Vader, where it's himself as a body, and then he brings in another body with him. Moreover, in SWU, removal is less needed in every color because units can attack other units. So your units, you don't have like a problem that you see in, again, some other games where you're not allowed to attack other units, and therefore, if you have good units, you effectively also have removal for as long as you can maintain control of the board. So it feels weird to me that green gets bite effects being like Strike True, Overwhelming Barrage, where you're using your unit's power to inflict damage on other units without getting hit back. But also, you get Ambush as a core keyword. You see it on ECL, which has seen an enormous amount of play. Green Vader, one of the reasons why it's played is that it's a big green ambush unit that brings out other units. So you've got a color where you've got ramp, which makes sense. You're trying to ramp up to the big boys, totally. And then you've got ambush, where ambush is a tool that is really useful when you're behind on board, right? Like if you're ahead on board, you don't need ambush because you can just attack into other people's units. With your big units that you already have on the board, but ambush lets you catch up. If you are behind and you ambush in a strong unit, that's a way of getting a unit on the board and also dealing with their unit. So you're able to not be as behind. But the fact that you are going to probably be ahead in resources and you are also going to be having this ambush, it turns ambush from a tool to catch up into a tool to try and maintain that strong presence over the board. So I feel like green has too much good stuff, and I think that in the future, I would really like if some elements were split out among the other color pie. For example, I think that the Krell effect should probably have been in red. I think that red is the color about throwing away your units, and Krell drawing cards for having your units die feels kind of red-y, and maybe they don't want to do red cards.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, it feels villainy. You can make a lot of arguments, but double
not
green
seems
super
like, green. Yeah.
Right. Double green seems like a weird home for it. And then ambush, I can understand if you're behind in green, you need a way to catch up. Your unit-based ambush is a good way to do that. But I feel like ambush has a much more natural fit in yellow because yellow is the kind is either like the tricky color, and it's a color that doesn't have kind of removal baked in. So maybe that would be a good home for it, but we'll see. Like there have been some very good yellow ambush units spoiled in the next set, so maybe yellow. This is just an aberration. Anyway, so the prosecution rests.
Defense. Green has the appropriate amount of the color pie. It just has the obvious portion. Mm-hmm. I think the key thing is we're looking at Spark of Rebellion, and
sure.
Star Wars Unlimited is a unit-based game. Mm-hmm. Green is the color of units.
Yes.
And those two dovetail very nicely, admittedly. But the missing component that I think you're not latching onto, mm-hmm. And that we're actually seeing play out, is that Spark of Rebellion is the most basic of set. It has to cover the obvious stuff, the really mm-hmm. easy, you're learning to play stuff. And I think mm-hmm. you're seeing that in that green started out very high in the meta, and then as people are learning about it, shifting to other colors. But green is it's the timmiest of colors, and so it's the one that you're new to the game. You're bringing in assumptions from other games. It's got that. Okay, I'm in a unit-based game. This is the unit-based color. So by learning the game, I learn how to play green. Once you've got a good grasp of Star Wars Unlimited, I think you are well on your way. You're most of the 4 aspects on your way to getting a good grasp of how to play Green. Green wants you to play the game the way Spark of Rebellion assumes you're playing. But in a similar manner to, they've alluded to, they've stated that in future sets, as the pool expands, a space dominant strategy that having an overwhelming number of your units in the space arena will be a viable strategy. Not like planned, like in that in-between space between cards they've already designed and tested and cards that we've seen. There is a meta where space is a viable strategy. And I think similarly, there are event-heavy strategies, future card-type heavy strategies that don't lean as heavily into green that are forthcoming. But the obvious stuff in Spark of Rebellion is, oh, I need units. Like, I need the most basic of ramp. Like, you can't get any simpler than resupply. You know, so that seems obvious. You can't, you know, you can't get any simpler than 97th Legion, right?
That's just
get big by resources. Big dude. But to that end, they've said, I don't think green is as big boy as you think it is, because green, they've said, is the big boy of space, and green obviously dominates the capital ship trait. The good capital. I mean, Avenger is amazing. One of my favorite cards, if not my favorite card in Spark of Rebellion. Chimera exists. Relentless Raider is playable.
It's good. It's good.
It's good.
It's good.
It's good. If you're playing Red Villainy, Relentless Raider seems like a compelling card. But against, you know, you've got Relentless, you've got Home One, you've got Devastator, right? Like there's so many green capital ships. But if you look outside of vehicles, right? Same thing. You've got a couple of nice big boy walkers, but outside of vehicles, non-vehicle traits, right? North of cost 5 in green is Vader and 97th Legion. 97th Legion is not really playable, right? So you've got one, and I realize, I acknowledge, I'm making a caveat of non-vehicles, but like it's a very specific slice of big boys. You don't get. We're not going to get a lot of cool, iconic big boys. You're not going to get a lot of uniques who get that power bump, right? Out in green, right? Like, and that aren't vehicles, who can't get the good attachments, right? You don't get to have a lot of lightsabers on green outside of Vader.
And
so, but Krell's costs 5.
Not playable. Yeah.
He's also not playable. I'm saying, like getting past the mid game into end game. They're just. There isn't, you know, like, sure, Krell's fine. Like, there's some 5 costs, but the only one non-vehicle green units who cost more than 5 are 97th and Vader. So it's a very specific subset of big boys. So one, it's obvious, and as the game is able to explore non-obvious places, I think green doesn't have too big a slice of the color pie. I think it's big boys are not as big as you think. But really, I think the proof is in the pudding, in that green might have a lot of like obvious Timmy-esque aspects of the color pie, and that's why you saw them so early. But the game's shifting, right? And I think part of that is because people are learning to play around ECL, right? Like I don't think green dominated the early meta, even because green was too powerful. I think ECL is fantastic, but as the meta shifts, there's a lot of people looking for those 30 hit point bases, and if you're going for a 30 hit point base, I think you can move out of green, which is why you're seeing like a shift. You know, Boba Green runs ECL, but Boba Yellow runs 30 hit points, right? Sabine Green runs ECL, but Sabine Yellow runs maybe Jeddah City, but like plenty of them run 30 hit point bases. So if it covered too much of the card, I mean, I get why, like from a pure Melvin standpoint, maybe it covers more ground conceptually than suits you, but I mean, it doesn't cover too much in that we're not needing to see any carve outs. It's not dominating enough of the space.
All right.
Dear listener, judge listener, in the comments, please. Does green have too big a slice of the color pie? Next claim. There's too much good stuff in Spark Rebellion, not enough build around. Ned, would you like to be for or against?
I kind of want to do the affirmative. I want to do the prosecution here. I know I'm being selfish, but
I'm perfectly happy to talk about build around cards in Spark Rebellion, Ned.
All right.
Lay the case.
The core argument is a bunch of the setup payoff cards in Spark of Rebellion kind of don't work. So an example of this, I think that's obvious, is Vanguard Ace. Vanguard Ace is a card. It says do a thing. We discussed back in the previews, and I think has been borne out empirically, doing the thing does not give you enough of a payoff, right? Like you can jump through hoops and you can get a big payoff, but your payoff isn't really there. Another example of this is Galactic Ambition. Galactic Ambition is a card. It has a really bold claim on it. It's like, okay, you're going to be able to do this exciting thing, but like the payoff is you get Devastator out a couple of turns early and it's less good. And you did 10 damage to your base. So like these kinds of like, we're setting up a challenge for you. Can you jump through the hoop? The jumping through the hoop doesn't get you what you want. It doesn't get you anything. Another example I think about this is You're My Only Hope, which I could see, I have tried to build very weird decks with Han, where basically you run no 1 and 2 cost units. You only run 3 and up so that you're never trading down for You're My Only Hope. And potentially you're trading up. But it's not good enough. It just doesn't pay off. And if you have these setup payoff cards, you want, for people who are degenerate Johnnies like me, you want the payoff. If you say do something weird, you'll get paid off. You want the payoff to be there if you do something weird. Another example of this is even in the mini setup cards. So these aren't cards where it says like build a deck around me, but these are cards that say like I want you to. You can envision us doing something very odd with this, something unusual, something cool. Let's do it. So an example of this is like Mace Windu is a machine gun, right? Where you've got Mace Windu, you shoot him up with a bunch of stuff, and then you just mow down your opponent's board. Doesn't really work. It just, even for as expensive as removal is, and for as good as lightsabers are, the Mace Windu machine gun is just too long to get set up, and then the payoff is not good. Chewbacca the unit in yellow, hero yellow. Again, this says to me like, okay, here's an idea. You're gonna lay them up with electro stabs. You're gonna try and do some kind of a goofy thing where you're able to hold the fort against the whole opponent's board. I remember there was like a brief surge where like maybe with Chewbacca leader you can get something going, but it never really materialized. It's an interesting strategy, but it's not a great one. And again, like if I can appreciate interesting strategies, but in general, you want at least some of the interesting things to yield fruit. Another example of this is a card that I dearly love, Sneak Attack. I look at Sneak Attack and I see, okay, this is a way that I can get units slightly discounted and that I can guarantee that I'm able to get an on attack and a when defeated trigger out of them, right? Because they're coming in ready, it is very likely that I'm going to be able to get my on attack trigger out of them by attacking, and it's very likely that I'm going to be able to get the when defeated trigger out of them because they're guaranteed to die at the end of the round. There's just not enough good on attack and when defeated triggers, at least in set 1, for me to be able to have fun with Sneak Attack. Almost every time that I have drawn Sneak Attack, I have resourced it. And I have tried many, many times in Hero Yellow to make Sneak Attack go. It just hasn't. Another example of this is typo strategies, where typo strategies are you're looking for a keyword, not like a proper keyword, but like a
trait.
Keyword. Yes, a trait. Thank you for the. And you build around it. And there's hints of that with Trooper, right? Like there's Taggy, there's Vanguard, Elite with the one green guy. There's the Volunteer Soldier that is a fine card in Trooper-specific decks, theoretically, but it just doesn't pay off. You don't get really paid off for running a bunch of troopers, even though there's a fair bit of this typal stuff. Another example is vehicles. You look at vehicles. There's the walker, the neutral 4-cost walker that comes in ready if you control another vehicle. There's the hardpoint blaster. That's the attachment that's specifically for vehicles and seems pretty attractive. But if you build the typal deck, you do not get paid off. Wedge screams typal, right? Like Wedge says, build a vehicle typal deck, and you will kind of get paid off. But as we discussed back when we talked about Wedge, Wedge is fine, but giving ambush to vehicles is on your 5 resource turn. You're not being able to ambush in a vehicle after you play Wedge. You can't, on 6, okay, you can start ambushing in vehicles, but already a bunch of the heroism green vehicles are already ambushing. So why? What? You're not getting a payoff. So in short, the cards that we see and the decks that we see are very heavily slanted towards good stuff decks and not as much towards weird build around, let's do a weird thing and get it to pay off. And I appreciate that in a competitive environment, you're not always going to see that, but throw me a bone here. Come on.
Against, there's plenty of build around, even though good stuff is awesome. And my arguments are twofold, Ned. One,
okay.
You're wrong. And two, leaders. I'll start with my first argument. Typal is not sufficiently built around when you choose terrible types. But we've got plenty of good types in this game that are built around. You have the obvious one, Force. Force is totally viable, right? Like you're looking for your hits. It's limited to certain colors, right?
Sure.
Red, blue, and sideboard. Sidebar, sorry, getting my term TCG and lawyer terms mixed up. Sidebar, I cannot wait for more yellow and green Force. I cannot wait for it to have 4-color Force. But we have plenty of Force. It is built around. You've got decks like Vader Blue and Chira who are running lots of Force units and looking for that critical threshold for their key cards. Maybe not competitively viable, but Spectre is crazy build around. And that's the entry level. That's the 2 constrained build around that I don't like, but exists. You have Rebel, which isn't quite build around enough in that it's limited to certain leaders, certain cards to care, but it's there in set 1. You've got cards like the Official, right? Emperor's Royal Guard. You're looking for Emperor's Royal Guard is fantastic if you have enough officials. So then it kind of tweaks the, am I looking, if I include one more official, it makes ERG worthwhile. Does that push make this official worthwhile is a constant deck decision. And then you take a step back and you say, okay, so you got cards like Fichibi, right? Like, that is absolutely a deck that, well, this is a good card in my red hero deck, but it's not a hero card, so I can't run it because I need to meet some minimum threshold for 4-cost, I believe in. I need to meet some minimum threshold of events for Bosk and for Greedo. I mean, people care less about Greedo, but it's there.
I care about Greedo.
Well, I'm saying you're going to run Greedo no matter what, right? As long as you have any events in your deck, Greedo and you're yellow, like
yeah, I'm flipping. Yeah, 100% of the time.
He's a fantastic 1-cost unit. So if you pick good types for one set, there's actually plenty of build around. But I think you're leaving out the key, like it's almost invisible, right? Because you're only focusing on the main deck. But in their talk about what they had learned from other games. I don't think that was their topic, but they were talking about what they learned about the other games. One of the devs, might have been Ryan, maybe it was Tyler. I don't know. One of the devs mentioned that they had, they had built in the best aspect of Commander into the core game. That there are leaders in the core game, and I don't think you can discount that. That by picking your leader, you've already picked a card to build around. You have Vader blue, you have Iden red, and you have Krennic red. Those all 3 are blue-red Villainy decks that are all very different because you are building around their leader ability. And we're going to get more blue-red Villainy decks in another set, but we're only talking about Spark of Rebellion. But we've, of the, 5 Villainy blue-red, nobody's playing IG-88. Grand Inquisitor Blue is a color people play,
I played
right?
It. It's good. Yeah.
That's a 4th deck that is blue-red Villainy, and so you can't discount that original build-around choice. The Krennic and Iden have a non-trivial amount of overlap, but the rest of those, I mean, even if you collapse Krennic and Iden into 2 build-arounds. They're different than Vader Blue and Grand Inquisitor Blue, right? So you've already built around those cards. They are the defining thing you build around, and so if you pick. So that's it. I rest. Good types prove there's good build around. Leaders are build around. So listener in the comments, is there too much good stuff? Is there not enough build around, or is there plenty? And it's great the way it is. Ned. Next statement, next claim before the court. Saboteur should have been 2 abilities. I disagree, so I will take the against, Ned. I will represent the defense.
So taking the prosecution case, this is an extremely minor nitpick, but I'm gonna bring it before the court because small claims court is the thing. I keep forgetting about the stupid shield thing. I keep forgetting to defeat shields on attack. I look at Saboteur, my brain shortcuts it to you can attack around Sentinel units. And I do.
Which feels like not enough.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like plenty. And not only that, but also the number of games in which I have attacked an opponent's base with a Saboteur unit, they've pointed at their cell block guard, and I've said Saboteur, and they've gone, oh, is larger than I think counts. So the fact that Saboteur gets around, either Saboteur needs to be signposted more aggressively and people need to spend more mental energy around it, which I think is hard to ask in a competitive card game, or it needs to be made like a screamingly obvious thing, and forgetting about and having that shield extra rider on it just makes it harder to occupy the brain space of Saboteur is an ability that does a couple of things. That's it.
So I'm going to hit you with some anti-slap lawsuits, Ned, for unfairly wasting my time and making me spend money on the defense. 1. Reading the card explains the card. This is why they put reminder text on the cards. 2, Saboteur, I think people forget the shield because in Spark of Rebellion, there's less shield than there could be. I think we're about to see a lot more shield. I think we're about to see a lot more stacked shields. And so there's no way to make Saboteur do more stuff just in Spark of Rebellion. But I think... it is an answer to 2 problems, and I think you have to do that 2 for 1, right? Because Sentinel does a thing, and it doesn't matter what you're playing. My Sentinel does something. Mm-hmm. Shield does a thing. It doesn't matter what you're playing. My Shield does a thing. You can't have an anti-card that exists only as an anti-card to a thing, because the subset of space that can take up in the topography of a set is smaller than whatever it's anti, right? Like if you have a card that just goes around Sentinel, any number of however many people are playing Sentinel, a fewer number of people are going to play the anti-Sentinel because it's a dead card if somebody isn't playing Sentinel. So you got to 2 for it, that it's anti-Sentinel and anti-Shield, because then you're reaching the critical mass of people who are playing either Sentinel or Shield to make Saboteur worth it. So you got to 2 for it, and we're going to see more of it. I think I am sympathetic to your inability to read the card, because we have so few just Sentinel cards compared to similar to Shielded. But I mean, even Shielded, we have a number of cards that what they do is they come in with a shield. Crafty Smuggler, and 7th Fleet Defender. We have a number of cards, a lot of cards, that are just Sentinel, right? That dictate the flow of the battle. We actually don't have a ton of cards that are just Saboteur. They're always Saboteur plus Raid, or Saboteur plus Seven Sinister shenanigans, or whatever. So it's one little word shadowed by a bunch of text. But that doesn't mean that the keyword should be split. It very much exists as two things. Don't even get in the comments, dear listener judge. Shut him down. Ned's wrong. Second, penultimate claim before the court. Xander is a Sith Lord. Subtitle, Villainy, too strong. Ned, would you like to be for or against?
I feel like I've been doing a lot of the prosecution, so I'll take my turn as the defense here.
Okay. 100% true. I believe in this all the way. I believe that Xander is secretly in control of everything that's happening at Star Wars Unlimited Development, and I think Star Wars Unlimited Development very much is too pro Villainy. You've got all of the top end leaders are, Vader and Luke arguably equal. Vader's a little more valuable than Luke, but I think that's because Vader's backed up by more good stuff. Behind Luke, you've got Kanan, Obi-Wan, whereas Villainy, you've got Dooku, you've got Boba Fett, you've got Seven Sister, you've got you've just got so many iconic singular units in Villainy who are doing great things. Heroism has got Han Solo, right? There's I feel like heroism decks are carried by a lot of less iconic characters. Mid-range, same thing, right? The bad guys. So you got the top end, better in Villainy. The mid-range, better in Villainy. Super Laser Tech, they have it, right? And they don't. Heroism has no counterpart. Boba Fett, Bosk, auto includes. There aren't as many auto includes in Heroism, and so far we have no multi-target removal in Heroism. We have some Bombing Run and Neutral, but both Overwhelming Barrage and Super Laser Blast are in Villainy, and I think this is a result of a natural parallel between the nature of TCGs. Heroes want to save the day, and so thematically heroic cards want to be save the day cards. Villains want to make somebody else suffer, so thematically make somebody else suffer cards belong in Villainy. But TCGs are about making the person across from you suffer, at a fundamental level. Maybe you're nice and you do it fast, maybe you're mean and you drag it out for 55 minutes. But at the end of the day, you're trying to make someone lose. This is not a place where you're trying to get to union. This is not a place where you're trying to get to harmony. You can't all get along. There are two of you, and one of you is going to lose. And so I think that thematically seems obvious in Villainy in a way that green versus yellow, it's not an obvious question. Blue versus red, it's not an obvious question. But black versus white, Villainy is the color of murdering, which is Villainy is the color of doing lots of damage to your opponent because you don't like them and you want to win. And so I think they take the easy layups, the easy thematic layups, and give it to Villainy because it seems obvious. And so then you're left with a lot of play the game. Hero cards are fun to play, but Villainy cards win. And that's what I've got. Hero cards are fun to play. Villainy cards win.
So, for the defense, I would begin by addressing, in the question of mid-range, you said that there's no comparable card to Super Laser Tech, but there is Dispatcher. Dispatcher does have the similar ramp effect in Heroism, and you can make arguments about it's less good, but particularly in Luke shells, you do see a lot of play for the Dispatcher. So there's that. As far as like these middle tier, like who are we backing up? You can make arguments about like the top end in heroism being less exciting, in the sense that like Unit Vader, Unit Palpatine don't seem to have, like Unit Vader you can draw a parallel with Unit Luke, but Han doesn't really pair well, is not comparable against Palpatine. But I think that in the mid-range, you do see a lot of very solid units. I think that Kanan and Ezra are both perfectly good, solid units that do see a lot of play. Ezra less so, just because he's in a color pair that is not played as much very well. But I will say that Frank Oz's Yoda, I have seen running around with a lightsaber too many times for me to count. And for like a relatively unassuming 2/4 draws a card on defeat card. Like
and restore.
That little Muppet. Yeah. Pardon?
And restore.
That Muppet has inflicted more losses on me than I would care to count. So just sort of minor nitpicks. Onto the kind of bulk of the claim. I think that it was very explicit when they were talking about set 1 that they didn't have room for all moralities, for all archetypes. Is that they said they were going to have set 1 lean heroism towards aggression, and they were going to have it lean more towards control in villainy, just because they need to. You have only so many cards. And so because you have heroism leaning aggression, you are naturally going to have fewer exciting, unique characters, because you're playing with the crummy bottom end, right? Like, if you're playing aggro, you are playing a bunch of goofball, nameless jokers that die. And like Battlefield Marine, Echo Base Defender are both cards that don't really have comparable analogs in villainy and are quite strong. Past that, if we look at the empirical evidence, and here I'm citing like the Garbage Rollers meta snapshot dated June 3rd, yes, villainy runs the table in control and hard control, but heroism runs the table in aggression burn, single-handedly on the back of Sabine. And then in tempo and mid-range, heroism is 2 of the 3 meta decks, with Boba Fett being the sole stalwart villain in those sections. So if you were going to just like count again, this is an extremely artificial sampling, but we see pretty good representation from both sides of the morality axis. And then I expect as we move into set 2, we're going to see more of these like iconic hero characters in higher power forms as we have more heroism, control, and slower mid-range decks. So I feel like I can't speak to Xander's character. I'm sure that he's an upstanding individual, and he's welcome to come onto the show to dispel any doubts about his trips to Exegol and general villainous behavior.
Just for fun.
Just for fun.
Pure tourism.
Yeah. The Defense Press.
All right, listener, get into the comments. Ned and I are trying out a call to action because YouTube keeps telling us we should do that. Is villainy too strong in Spark of Rebellion? And for our last claim, Spark of Rebellion is, while there's room to grow in Star Wars Unlimited, Spark of Rebellion is the most, or one of the most diverse, balanced set ones that Ned and I have encountered in our TCG LCG career. I'm going to dibs 4, Ned.
Okay, all right, only fair.
So I think we've got almost every color is represented. Every aspect pairing is represented. For every Hera or Jin, there is a Leia or Han. Some of the leaders, some of the aspect pairings like Blue Villainy, both leaders are totally viable. Nothing's been dominant the whole time, as you made the claim, which I'm not conceding, but I'm now folding into my own argument, that Boba, started out very strong, but the meta has responded. We've seen control at the top. We've seen control dominate. We've seen aggro at the top. We've seen aggro dominate. There's a full spread of leaders. You can't go 16 for 16. I think that's an impossible dream. But I'd say like 9, 10 of the 16 have made serious showings at events somewhere. And I think that's commendable. And I haven't seen anything like... I mean, there are 16 leaders, which is more options than have existed in most Fantasy Flight games. There are more archetypes available period than existed. So the fact that they're viable is incredible. I rest.
Now, I may be a simple country lawyer, but I know when I'm licked, so the defense rests.
Okay.
Can we put that? I apologize on behalf of everyone who had to listen to that terrible accent. I'm really sorry. I had to.
I think the accent and the apology might be our first YouTube short. But again, we've now thanked FFG twice in a week because we thank them for our preview cards. But thank you to Fantasy Flight. This Sparker Rebellion brought me back into TCGs after 20 years. It has been that compelling. Sparker Rebellion has brought Ned into Discord. It is that compelling. So a set that is that good. It's been a blast playing. I am ready for Shadows. I think Ned, yes. You're ready for Shadows.
I am ready for Shadows. I'm excited to try out some new strategies. I'm excited to get my heart broken by Build Around Jank again, and we'll see how she goes.
Everybody's excited about the new leaders. I'm actually really excited. Not GI, but whatever. I'm really excited to see the Sparker Rebellion leaders get an infusion, get changed up. I've been thinking about a blue Sabine control shell. I'm trying to use Sabine as control. Probably a terrible idea, but I'm excited to try it. So thank you, Fantasy Flight. Thank you for sticking with us, dear listener. We started this with Sparker Rebellion, and we are now into Shadows. The podcast is now more than one set long. And when you next hear from us in 2 to 3 weeks, I hope your pre-release has gone wonderfully.
Adios.